Grubbstown, Jackson County, Arkansas, USA. These are places where everyone knows danger seems far away, that nothing truly bad can happen there, that familiarity equals safety. Grubbs, a rural town in Jackson County, Arkansas, was one of those places. With a population of just over 300 people, it was quiet, close-knit, and predictable. Roads stretched through open farmland, traffic was scarce, and crime was almost unheard of. That sense of safety was shattered on a warm afternoon in August 2020, when 25-year-old Sydney Sutherland went out for a run and never returned. Sydney Sutherland had grown up in Grubbs, surrounded by family, tradition, and community. She was born to Maggie and Dion Sutherland and was the youngest of 3 children. Her 2 older brothers, Tyler and Sam, were fiercely protective of her, and her bond with her mother was especially close. Maggie often said Sydney was not just her daughter, but her best friend. They spoke multiple times a day, shared every detail of their lives, and did almost everything together. Those who knew Sydney described her as bright, intuitive, and deeply caring. She had a natural ability to understand people, to sense when someone was struggling, and to offer support without being asked. Her smile was unforgettable, her laugh infectious. She was outgoing, warm, and genuine, the kind of person who left a lasting impression without ever seeking attention. Sydney lived with her boyfriend of 4 years, Alex, and worked as a nurse at Harris Medical Center. Nursing suited her perfectly. It allowed her to care for others in the same quiet, selfless way she always had. Outside of work, fitness played a major role in her life. She worked out nearly every day, loved running, and often used exercise as a way to clear her mind. She also cherished time with her young nieces, who affectionately called her Aunt Sassy, a nickname that captured her playful spirit. In early August 2020, Sydney and her family took a summer trip to Destin, Florida. It was a rare pause from routine, a chance to relax and enjoy time together before returning to work and daily responsibilities. They arrived back home on August 18th, settling back into normal life. The following day, August 19th, Sydney was seen on her Ring doorbell camera unloading items from her car. She had just returned from the gym, where she had spent an hour training. Even after traveling, she wasted no time resuming her routine. Fitness was not just a hobby for Sydney, it was a part of who she was. That afternoon, she stopped by her mother Maggie's house to drop off some mail. The visit was brief but familiar. Sydney mentioned she planned to go home, bake brownies or cookies, and then go for a run. Maggie gently reminded her not to push herself too hard, noting that she had already been to the gym earlier that day. Sydney brushed it off with a smile. Running helped her think. It gave her peace. As she walked out the door, she turned back and said, "I love you. I'll talk to you later." Maggie replied, "I love you too," unaware that those words would become her final goodbye. After returning home, Sydney set up her Apple Watch and headed out for her run. She chose a familiar route near County Road 41 and State Highway 18, between Newport and Grubbs, a stretch of road she had traveled countless times. The area was rural and isolated, lined with fields, scattered homes, and long, empty roads where traffic was rare. Sometime between 2:30 and 3 p.m., a UPS driver noticed Sydney jogging along the road. He later recalled the moment clearly because it was unusual to see anyone out there. There were no other cars, no pedestrians, just Sydney running alone under the Arkansas sun. Another local resident, a farmer known as Quake, also reported seeing Sydney jogging that afternoon. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She appeared uninjured, calm, and alone. There were no signs of distress. No one was following her. Then, without warning, she disappeared. As the afternoon passed, Alex began to worry. Sydney had been gone longer than expected. Calls to her phone went unanswered. Text messages were never opened. Her Snapchat activity was completely silent. This behavior was alarming. Sydney never ignored messages and would never intentionally cause concern. Alex contacted Maggie. She hadn't heard from Sydney since their brief visit earlier that day. As evening approached, Panic set in. Sydney's phone continued to go straight to voicemail. There were no updates, no explanations, no reassurance. What began as concern quickly turned into fear. Police were notified, and a search began almost immediately. Officers, family members, and volunteers spread out along the roads and surrounding fields. Flashlights cut through the darkness as cars slowly drove back and forth, scanning ditches and tree lines. The once quiet town of Grubbs filled with sirens, search teams, and a growing sense of dread. By early the next morning, the search had expanded dramatically. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office was joined by Arkansas State Police, the Arkansas Department of Correction, U.S., Marshals, the FBI, and several neighboring law enforcement agencies. Helicopters searched from above, while hundreds of volunteers combed the ground below. Authorities began tracking pings from Sydney's phone, narrowing down her last known location to the same area where she had last been seen running. Then, a crucial discovery was made. Sydney's phone was found lying on the ground, undamaged, less than a quarter of a mile from her home. There were no obvious signs of a struggle nearby. No blood, no clear explanation. Hour after hour, hope began to fade. Sydney was petite, just 5 feet 3 inches tall, and weighing approximately 103 pounds. The realization that someone could have easily overpowered her on those empty roads was terrifying. During the search, Maggie Sutherland made a discovery that would forever change her. While crawling along the roadside, desperately scanning the ground, she spotted a small white bead. She recognized it instantly. It had come from Sydney's bracelet. In that moment, Maggie felt a truth settle in her chest, one no mother should ever have to face. Her daughter had not simply wandered off. Something terrible had happened. And as the search continued, the small town of Grubbs stood frozen in fear, unaware that the person responsible for Sydney's disappearance had already been hiding in plain sight. As the search for Sydney Sutherland entered its third day, the atmosphere in Grubbs had shifted from anxious hope to quiet dread. The longer she remained missing, the harder it became to believe in a miracle. Hundreds of volunteers continued combing the fields and back roads, while law enforcement followed every lead, no matter how small. Vigils were held at night, candles flickered along the roadsides, and prayers echoed through a town that had come to a standstill. Then, on the morning of Friday, August 21st, authorities announced they were working several promising leads. Just hours later, the search took a devastating turn. Sydney Sutherland's body was discovered buried in a shallow grave in a field not far from where she had last been seen running, the very area that had been searched repeatedly. The news sent shockwaves through Jackson County. What had begun as a missing persons case instantly became a homicide investigation. The medical examiner later determined that Sydney had died from multiple blunt force injuries. The violence inflicted upon her body confirmed what her family had feared, but could hardly accept. Sydney had been attacked, overpowered, and killed. Jackson County Sheriff David Lucas, who had known Sydney and her family personally, spoke openly about the toll the case had taken on him. He described watching Sydney grow up, attend school with his own children, and become a young woman full of promise. Now he was standing before the public, announcing that her life had been brutally taken. As investigators processed the scene, the focus quickly turned to identifying who could have committed such a crime in a town where almost everyone knew each other. The answer, when it came, was almost unthinkable. 2 days after Sydney's body was found, authorities named their suspect, 28-year-old Quake Llewellyn. The revelation stunned the community. Quake was not a stranger. He was a local, a third-generation farmer who managed thousands of acres of land. He was married and had stepchildren. His family was well known and respected, even receiving Jackson County Farm Family of the Year honors just a few years earlier. Most chilling of all, Quake had been deeply involved in the search for Sydney. He had joined search parties, participated in online groups, and even offered comfort to her family. At one point, he hugged Maggie Sutherland while expressing sympathy, the same hands that had ended her daughter's life. Maggie later recalled feeling something was wrong during that interaction. When she asked Quake directly if he had seen anything unusual, he calmly replied that Sydney was just running and that nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Though his words offered no answers, something about the exchange left Maggie unsettled. She walked away with a feeling she could not shake. Investigators soon learned that Quake himself had come forward to police, claiming he might have been the last person to see Sydney alive. Both he and his father consented to searches of their vehicles. It did not take long for officers to notice blood on the tailgate of Quake's pickup truck. Digital evidence further tightened the net around him. Data from his phone placed him in the same vicinity where Sydney's phone had been found. Her body was later located near land associated with his farm. Surveillance footage from Quake's home showed him leaving in his truck and returning sometime later, the vehicle now bearing visible damage. Faced with mounting evidence, Quake eventually confessed. He told investigators that he had been driving westbound on County Road 41 when he saw Sydney running. According to his initial claim, he said a cloud of dust obscured his vision and that he accidentally struck her with his truck. But investigators did not believe it was an accident. According to the Arkansas State Police, evidence showed that Quake had intentionally turned his vehicle around, accelerated towards Sydney, and hit her on purpose. He then abducted her, placing her in the back of his truck. Over the next period of time, he sexually assaulted her before beating her and burying her in a shallow grave in a nearby field. Quake admitted to removing her clothes and later disposing of evidence. Police recovered clothing he had worn during the crime from a laundry basket at his mother's house, including a black shirt with blonde hair attached and a pair of black and pink shorts. The full scope of the crime was horrifying. Quake Llewellyn was formally charged with capital murder, rape, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. He pleaded not guilty at first, but was deemed mentally competent to stand trial. If convicted, he faced the death penalty. As the case moved forward, disturbing allegations about Quake's past behavior began to surface. Anonymous sources described a pattern of troubling conduct, including stalking young women, peering into bedroom windows, and harming animals. While not all claims were formally introduced in court, they painted a disturbing picture of a man who had long gone unchecked. Quake's wife filed for divorce, and authorities confirmed she had no knowledge of her husband's crimes. She, too, was a victim left to grapple with the reality that the man she trusted had committed an act of unimaginable cruelty. After months of legal proceedings, prosecutors discussed a plea deal with the Sutherland family. The agreement would remove the death penalty from consideration in exchange for a guilty plea to capital murder and rape. The kidnapping and abuse of a corpse charges would be dismissed. For Sydney's family, the decision was agonizing. They wanted justice, but they also wanted closure. They wanted the case to end without years of appeals, delays, and repeated trauma. In the end, they agreed. In court, Quake Llewellyn pleaded guilty. Maggie Sutherland was given the opportunity to address him directly. She asked him to look her in the eyes as she spoke. She told him that Sydney was not his to take, that the hands he had used to hug her during the search were the same hands that had killed her daughter. She asked questions no parent should ever have to ask: whether Sydney had fought, whether she had cried, whether she had called out for her brothers. She ended her statement with words that would echo through the courtroom, that true justice would be having her daughter back, something no sentence could ever provide. Quake Llewellyn was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led away, the town of Grubbs began the slow process of grieving and remembrance. Sydney's funeral was attended by so many people that it was streamed live to allow everyone to say goodbye. In the months and years that followed, Sydney's legacy endured. The overpass near where she was running was renamed in her honor. Community runs called Finish Sydney's Run became an annual tradition, with participants often wearing pink, her favorite color. Scholarships were created in her name to support students pursuing careers in healthcare. The small white bead Maggie found during the search now lives on as a symbol worn close to her heart, a reminder of her daughter's life, love, and light. Sydney Sutherland went for a run on a road she had known since childhood. No one thought twice about it. And that is the most haunting truth of all: how ordinary the moment was. and how quickly everything changed. Her story is a reminder that danger does not always come from the outside. Sometimes it is already among us, hiding behind familiarity, trust, and silence. And though Sydney did not finish her run, the world continues to run for her, carrying her name, her kindness, and her memory forward, one step at a time.